Tonight we're going to talk about controlled ESP, alpha and theta brainwave control that would give you mental brain programming, ESP, telepathy, clairvoyance. We're going to talk about parapsychology and the latest science called mind physiology. We're also dealing with the science of psychology, which basically deals in the detection and measurement of the human behavior. This science went one step further into the field and called it parapsychology, which is the science that measures and detects the psi factor, such as, can a person influence the roll of the dice, or can a person predict the turn of a card? Or do people actually have psychic ability, such as Gene Dixon, Peter Herkus, Arthur Ford, Edgar Casey, to name a few in general. This is what Dr. J.B. Rhine from Duke University is very famous for and said to be the father of parapsychology. We have gone further into this science and we call it mind physiology, which is very simply the science of developing an individual to function psychically. This is also the science of being able to consciously control your brainwave frequencies and use those controlled brainwave frequencies for general self-improvement purposes. This would give you a greater memory, greater concentration, greater habit control, greater health, or any other area that you would like to use it in. All of the major news media, such as radio, television, newspapers, magazines, have all been speaking and writing about the conscious control of the alpha and the theta regions of the brain. Let's take a look at what they're speaking about. First of all, every individual has a brainwave frequency. This is the electrochemical activity of your brain. It's recordable on an EEG machine. Everyone has 4 brainwave frequencies. Let's look at the different brainwave frequencies that we have. The first one we have is called beta. It's the area here in blue recordable from 14 to 32 cycles per second. The next area, known as alpha, is recordable from 7 to 14 cycles, and it's also called the REM time area. This is where you are when dreaming at night. When dreaming at night, you have rapid eye movement, so they simply shortened it to the initials, and they call it the REM time area. The next area, known as theta, is recordable from 4 to 7 cycles per second, and the area known as delta is recordable from 0.5 up to 4 cycles per second. Delta is also known as the unconscious state. This is where you are when dreaming, when you are in a deep sleep, when in a coma, and while under anesthesia. However, they've discovered that you are not unconscious while in delta, that you will hear and record onto your computer brain cells any conversation held in your presence. You will then give physical reaction here in the outer conscious level to that conversation, even though it was not about you. They have discovered that damage has been done and can be done to an individual during surgery or while in a coma by holding a negative conversation in their presence. They no longer hold a conversation during surgery or in your presence while you're in a coma for that purpose. There was a scientist this last year in New York that decided that if we can do damage to a person, why don't we simply reverse the conversation? Why don't we tell them how we want them to heal themselves? So he asked for terminally ill patients. They gave them to him while they were in a coma and while they were under anesthesia. He told them how he wanted them to heal themselves, how the body cells were to repair themselves, and they gave physical reaction here in the outer conscious level to that conversation. 80% of the people who were terminally ill healed themselves very rapidly according to his instructions, proving that we can reverse the conversation and tell them what we want them to do rather than what we don't want them to do. Dr. Carl Simonton is one of the scientists that's been involved in working with terminally ill people. He works predominantly with cancer patients. He was familiar with Dr. Alfred Cantor's findings, who is the founder of the Academy of Psychosomatic Medicine. Dr. Cantor said that 98% of our illnesses are psychosomatic in origin. That means that our diseases began with our own negative thoughts. Thoughts produce chemicals in this computer brain, and the negative thoughts sending out negative chemicals produced dis-ease in our physical body cells. Dr. Cantor found that by spending 1 hour a day with conscious awareness at the healing level of alpha, that we can heal ourselves of any disease. So Dr. Simonton put together a technique where people could use their imaginations for themselves instead of against themselves, and this is called guided imagery. And in working with terminally ill cancer patients, he found that 50% of them healed themselves in a very short period of time by using their imagination for themselves. There's a fellow who's called Dr. Jim McGaw at the Irvine College in California, one of the UC chain, who's been working with people, teaching them how to use their imaginations for themselves. He's the head of the department called psychobiology. He was predominantly interested in erasing traumatic events from a person's computer brain. He noted that when people had traumatic events such as a rape or physical beatings, that they seemed to live with this day and night and had a fear of this being repeated again. He felt there must be some way that we could erase this from a person's memory bank. He summed up 17 years worth of research in just a few minutes by stating that if you had a slab of marble and you wanted to imprint a picture in that slab of marble, that you would either have to chisel it or pour acid on that piece of marble. And the longer that you left the acid, the deeper it would etch into the marble. The deeper the imprint, the longer lasting it would be. He said that our computer brains are like that piece of marble, that each brain cell has memories imprinted by the acids we produce by our thoughts. He found that the more emotion and feeling that we have behind a thought, the more acid we produce, the deeper the etch, and longer lasting the memory. In his research, he found he could erase a traumatic event by introducing a neutralizing chemical into the person's body, neutralizing the acid they produced with their computer brains and their imaginations. But he must have a person within 4 hours of the time that the trauma has happened in order to erase the memory. He must also find out how much emotion and feeling you put behind the fear that you experienced when the trauma happened to you. So our brains are computers. These computers produce acid, and the more emotions that you have, the longer lasting the imprint on the computer brain. He also stated in his 17 years worth of research that when we are here at the slower, stronger brainwave frequencies, that we are producing more acid, more chemicals, than we are here in the outer, faster brainwave frequencies. And that's why in doing research in the educational field, they've found that your education is longer lasting when you have the key to tap your potential at the strong brainwave frequencies. Stronger frequencies make stronger impressions in the computer brain cells, gives you greater and easier recall at the outer conscious level. Our brainwave frequencies go into and out of these different levels many times during our days and nights, depending on what stage of day or night that you're in. For instance, if we had an EEG machine here in the room now and we were connected to it, we would be here in the blue area somewhere between 14 and 32 cycles per second. This is the outer conscious brain frequency that the normal individual uses to function on an outer conscious basis. For instance, if we were looking at the color red we would be seeing at one frequency. If we were looking at the color violet, we would be seeing at a different frequency. If we were listening to a bass drum, we'd be hearing at one frequency. And if we were listening to a piccolo, we would be hearing at a different frequency. Our mind intelligence automatically selects the frequency between 14 and 32 cycles per second that it needs to function on an outer conscious basis. When we get ready to go to sleep at night, our brain frequencies slow down, and it varies from 14 down to 0.5 cycles per second, depending on what stage of sleep we're in. For instance, when dreaming, we'll always be here between 7 and 14 cycles per second. Alpha is the dream time area, the rapid eye movement area, and everybody does dream. Even though you don't recall them, you still do dream. Must dream scientifically in order to maintain a physically healthy body. When dreaming at night, our body cells detoxify. After the toxins are cleaned out of the body cells, the food that we ate today has been turned into chemicals that becomes building material to repair worn-out body cells. The life force that's in that food becomes your life force, your energy for the following day. So we do dream, even though we don't recall them. We will be talking more about dreams later. They found that we adults dream approximately 25% of the time, that children dream approximately 50% of the time, and premature children dream almost 100% of the time. So we do dream. We do dream, and we do drift through alpha, through theta, and into delta. During our sleeping night, we come back through theta into alpha very normally and very naturally. But we're not consciously aware of what is taking place when sleeping and dreaming at night. It is possible now, on a scientific basis, for us to learn to lower our frequencies step by step by step into the meditative state of alpha, maintain conscious awareness, be aware of what's taking place while there, and use those strong brainwave frequencies for whatever need that we have. And that's why the scientists are very excited about our being able to use them with a controlled conscious awareness basis. Stronger frequencies make stronger impressions on the computer brain cells. The stronger the impression, the greater the recall and usability of that level. The stronger here, the greater the recall here. You want to make a habit change? Program the habit change at the strong frequencies. It makes it simple and easy to make that change at the outer conscious level. There was a noted research scientist in California that put on a national program called The Unexplained on television, and he was demonstrating the controlled awareness at alpha and theta in the educational field. Dr. Joe Kamaya trained the college students to step into alpha with awareness, received lecture material, read their books at the strong frequencies, to take their test while maintaining alpha awareness, and found that every student improved more than 1 grade point average, an increase of more than 1 grade point average. He said there are 2 things that we need to have a great memory. That the first thing we need is a relaxed mind, and when the mind part of man is relaxed, information flows easily from the brain cells. Have you ever taken a test, read a simple question and knew you knew the answer? And the harder you tried for that answer, the more it eluded you until the test was over. When the test was over, you took a deep breath and said, "Wow, am I glad that's over." The moment you relaxed, the information flowed from the brain cells. As long as you were uptight, you had test trauma, and the information was not available to you. The second thing we need is a series of pegs to associate things with, because our minds function by association. People often confuse the mind and the brain, as being one and the same thing, when in fact they are two totally different things. The mind part of man is abstract, but can be controlled in one's own self-control. When in your own control, it enhances all the outer areas of your life. We daily use a product that's abstract that man's been controlling for many years. It's called electricity. They haven't seen it. They don't know where it comes from. They don't know what size, what shape, or what color. But this abstract energy force brought under man's control, we see manifested all about us in many different forms and use it in controlled conditions daily. Let that electricity go off and find out how much or how little can you do. The mind part of man, when you bring into your own control, greater enhances your outer life than does electricity. But it must be in your control with self-awareness, self-control to enhance all the areas of your outer life. So Dr. Joe Kamaya trained the college students to be educated in alpha. He found they could reach out and lock onto the professors' minds, and when they did, their own minds didn't seem to wander as much. They had a higher degree of concentration and comprehension of material read or heard. He also found these college students began to control some of the physiological aspects of their bodies with their mind. Their heartbeat, pulse rate, respiration, temperature, this type of thing. When they did, they started having mental telepathy, ESP, clairvoyant type of experiences, and he didn't understand why that was happening, but it did happen. He also found that when he would read to them material while they were functioning with awareness in alpha, that they had greater recall of that material here in beta. What they were doing was by applying the stronger frequencies, they were making stronger impressions, gave them easier recall here of that information. He ran a 5-year period of research with college students trained to receive their education while functioning with alpha awareness. He found those that were trained to receive their education with alpha awareness could recall their information from as much as 5 to 50 times greater than those educated in the regular classroom here in beta. Now what they were doing, by receiving their education here at these slower frequencies, they were producing more chemicals that made deeper imprints on the computer brain cells. And the deeper the imprint, the longer lasting, and the greater the recall here. He tested this group 2 years later on information they'd heard 2 years before, and found they could still recall it as though having just heard it. Regular classroom. When tested on the information they'd heard 2 years before, they seemed to have forgotten what they had heard. So I'm sure that you can see how this will fit into the whole educational system. Awareness here, educated here. Stronger impressions, longer lasting, and this gives you the key to tap your potential. Those who are educated here do not have the key to use the total capacity of their computer brains. He also found that their health changes began to be greater. They made great changes in the conditions of their body physical cells, and he worked with some other researchers. There was another researcher that started out in the educational field with 2 aims. He wanted to know, do we have ESP, and if we have it, can we use it to improve our grade point average? Can we increase our grade point average by psychic ability? So this researcher, when first starting out, worked with adults and found that his research with adults was not honest. When he would ask them what they were experiencing, they would often try to second guess him. So this one worked with basically children. While working with children, he found they'd be very honest with him and that his research was a true research. First of all, he had to prove, do we have ESP? And can we use it for educational purposes? He was very familiar with Dr. Thelma Moss's research at UCLA. Dr. Moss is the head of the neuropsychiatric department. She's been involved in many aspects of psychic research. She also has taught the blind to see with the cells in their fingers, like you and I see with the cells in our eyes. I'm not speaking about reading with Braille. I am speaking about seeing with the cells in their fingers. The bit of knowledge that Dr. Moss started with is that in the centeredness of each of our body cells is the genetic code of our family tree and another you. We have billions of body cells held together by a mathematical beat. And in the centeredness of each cell is another you. They can remove that nucleus, implant it into an ovum, and incubate it, and out comes the exact carbon copy from whomever they took the cell. If it was taken from my body, it would be my height, my coloring, my mannerisms. They call this a clone. And the clone would be able to see, to hear, to smell, to taste, to feel, and to think, just as I am able to do those things. So she said, if the ability is there in the centeredness of those cells, why aren't we utilizing all that intelligence? So she did develop the technique where the blind could see with the cells in their fingers. Quite often people become alarmed as they realize the ability to produce another person is in the centeredness of the cells. And we've heard a lot this last year about people donating body cells to produce clones. People are quite alarmed about, let's say that if I decided I needed 600 more Helens, that I would donate 600 body cells. And really, who needs 600 more? Wouldn't it be boring if someone donated their body cells and we had billions of one person running around? Well, you really don't need to be concerned about the world being overrun by a group of clones. And the reason you don't need to be concerned is each person is unique. Everybody is created equal. We are born unequal. Let's look at how we were created equal. Beginning from day of conception, the first part of a person that is created is your computer brain. That first cell divided and multiplied. After the brain was developed, these cells grew as an extension from the computer brain. And since the computer brain is the first part that is created, they can pick up a brainwave frequency from day of conception, beginning at 0.5 cycles per second. And they found scientifically that a person is born 9 months old. So we were created equal, beginning with a computer brain, born unequal in the information that is written in the computer brain. This truly is a computer. And like any man-made computer, you cannot get anything out of this computer until it has first been put in. And the program of our computers are written beginning from day of conception, and whoever is in your mother's presence, not only her thoughts, moods, emotions, and feelings, but those of people who are in her energy field, have all played a role of writing the program in your computer, setting your lifestyle for how you are going to live the rest of your life. From day of conception, that program begins to be written, and from day of conception up to age 4, the major portion of your time is spent developing this delta level. And from age 4 to 7 is spent developing the theta level. Our programs in our computer brains are written from day of conception up through the first 7 years of our lives. So physically, it would be impossible to implant these body cells back into my mother's womb, put her back in time and space to be with the same people, to experience the same thoughts, the same moods, emotions, and feelings, to get another me. So that's why each of us are unique. Each of us are different. We are born equal, created equal, born unequal, because of information written in our computer brains. The rest of our lives is spent in a state of reaction to the information written in our computer brains the first 7 years. We'll come back to that in a little while and cover that in more detail. So it was up to this researcher to prove that we all have psychic ability and that we can use this psychic ability to improve our grade point average. In working with children, he was particularly interested in the educational part. Can we reach out, perceive information, improve our grade point average? So he found a group of mentally retarded children. He took the greatest handicap to see what would happen with them, teaching them how to go into altered states step by step, receiving their education, restructuring a program in their computer brains. He found that in a few short months, these children that were called educationally handicapped, mentally retarded, came back to what we call normal. He thought, well, maybe this was a coincidence. He looked for another group of children, mentally retarded, worked with them, and in the same amount of time, they too came back to what is called normal, and in his research, he found very few truly mentally retarded children. It has been my experience in this last 8 years in working with children as well as with adults that it doesn't matter what label is put on a person. What matters is how are they taught to use the computer brain. What kind of a program is written in here? One of the first things he discovered in working with the children was that as soon as their brainwave frequencies would hit the alpha level, that all nervous tensions and anxieties would leave them, just like this. And this is one of the first things you noticed in the first night of our class. As soon as your brainwave frequencies hit the alpha level, all nervous tensions and anxieties leave you, just like this. He also found that they began to control the physical aspects of their bodies with their minds through controlled brainwave frequencies, such as if they had a fast heart, they could slow it down. Slow heart, you can speed it up. High blood pressure, you can lower it. A low blood pressure, you can bring it back to what is called normal. We are not in the healing and diagnosing business, but we do make it clear to you that you heal yourself. The medical doctor merely sets the bones. The medical doctor merely gives you chemicals to put you in balance until you heal yourself. And the healing of yourself takes place in the alpha level, and that's why you dream a lot at night or during the day and sleep a lot when you are not well. It's so we can be in alpha, detoxify, and heal ourselves. There was a gentleman that attended my free lecture. He's a freelance writer for the London Times. He came up at the end of the lecture and inquired about my statement that you can lower your high blood pressure, that you can sleep at night without chemicals to put you to sleep. He didn't believe this. He came up and said, I am on the highest amount of medication to control a condition called high blood pressure. Tonight you spoke about being in control of your own blood pressure by simply going into the alpha state. And I said, yes, you can. He said, you mean that I can do this myself? He said, the doctors can't give me any more medication. I'm on the highest amount. You mean simply by going into alpha that I can lower my own blood pressure? And I said, you certainly can. He said, I have a father-in-law that hasn't slept for 15 years. You mean to tell me that simply by going into the alpha state that he can go to sleep at night? And I said, he certainly can. He said, you know I don't believe you. And I said, that's quite all right. I stand on science. He said, I'm going to take your class, and if what you say is so, I'm going to write a newspaper article about you. And by the same token, if what you say is so, is not so, then I'm also going to write a newspaper article about that. And I said, do be my guest. He wouldn't take the class from me. He took it from one of my instructors that I have trained. Called up his father-in-law from Fort Lauderdale, had him come out to California. They took the class from Donald, and the first night of class, Mr. Leitner felt a difference in his own body. One of the things that I'm very adamant about, if you have a health challenge, if you are on medication, you stay on that. You go to your doctor and you let your doctor take you off of your medication. He's not going to leave you on it if you don't need it. He's the one who has the knowledge to tell you whether you have healed yourself or not. So Mr. Leitner looked around Los Angeles looking for a doctor because his doctor was at Fort Lauderdale. Finally found a doctor that would take him and found that he was in control of his blood pressure, and the doctor did take him off of his medication. And his father-in-law, first night of class, soon as he hit the alpha level, he went to sleep and he slept all night long. Now that's not the object of this class. The object of this class is to go in the direction of sleep, but maintaining awareness so you can do something with those strong frequencies. But in his particular case, that's what he wanted. He slept all week long and slept all the way through his graduation. Going back to the researcher that was working with children, he had to prove scientifically that we have ESP, that we can reach beyond this physical, that we can be trained to perceive information outside of our physical bodies, use that information for whatever need that we have, be it education, health, profession, whatever our needs might be. So as he was working with the children, he took them into the alpha level, read to them a book while they were maintaining alpha awareness, gave them a test on that book, and found that they all scored more than 80% accurate. So then he took them into the alpha level and read to them a half of a book, but gave them a test on the whole book. And on the whole book, they scored more than 80% accurately. Now, he didn't know where they were getting the information on the portion he had not read to them. There were several possibilities. One of the possibilities was the fact he had read the book, which means the information's on his computer brain. Scientifically, they know that as we are within each other's energy field, which is approximately 60 feet, that while we're exchanging energy, we do have thought transference. That's why at the same time, two people will make the same statement, and we've all done this, haven't we? Because one person thought up the picture, the other one got the picture, and both spoke it at the same time. Not knowing that we can get thoughts from other people, we've walked around thinking that every thought we have is our own original idea. However, they've known for quite some time that man thinks in pictures. He does not think in words. We talk in words, but we think in pictures. That's why in a conversation you look at the other person and say, did you get the picture? Or you will say, I know what you're going to say, I got the picture. Because as we exchanged energy, picture thoughts went from person to person. That's also why Napoleon Hill says in Think and Grow Rich, to be careful of the company you keep. You become like those you associate with. Now let's look at why we become like those we associate with. As we're exchanging energy here, if one person thinks up a picture, on this exchange of energy, the other person gets the picture. As the picture comes on in your computer brain, electrochemical activity is produced, and the chemicals do go out to your body cells and become your flesh. You become like those you associate with. We quite often take other people's trips in life, besides just taking our own. As you exchange energy with them, produce the chemicals goes out to your body cells, and you must take a trip in time and space according to those chemicals. We find a lot of biblical quotations pertaining to mind science of thinking, speaking, acting, producing chemicals, and taking an Earth trip. I like to look at our bodies as spacesuits. And our spacesuit has equipment of eyes, ears, nose, mouth, hands, and run by a computer brain. And what runs this computer brain is imagination. And we daily have a choice of how we're going to use our imagination. We have the choice to use it for ourselves or to use it against ourselves. And the universal law is no respecter of persons. It doesn't care whether you use it for yourself or against yourself. The choice lies with you, the single individual. Whichever way that you use your imagination, it will produce chemicals. And as those chemicals go out and become your flesh, you will take a trip in time and space according to those chemicals. That's why you will live by every idle word that you utter. It also says in the book called the Bible, first, before I tell you what it says, let me tell you what the Bible means. It comes from a word B-I-B-L-I-O-N, biblion, which means a group of little books. I look at it strictly from a scientific standpoint so that I don't offend anybody's religious concepts. You can be Jewish, you can be Protestant, you can be Catholic, you can be agnostic or atheistic. Whatever your religious concepts, you do have a computer brain. And I find that the Old Testament is a group of books, a group of little books about the universal laws. The New Testament is how a man put those laws into action. He had the same type of spacesuit, the same type of equipment for his spirit to manifest on earth as we do. That's also why he said, all the things that I do, you can do too, and even greater. And if we are not doing the things he did, then we're not fulfilling the laws as he did. We're not obeying a commandment given to we mankind. So whatever your religious concepts are, I leave them to you. But we do look at the universal laws that are manifested through us, by us, as us, and we find it recorded throughout history by the different philosophers that man is a spirit taking an earth trip in a body spacesuit. Descartes, who's quite well known, said in the early 1600s that there are two separate worlds of reality, spirit and matter. And thanks to divine ordination, these two worlds come together in one point only, the human brain. Plotinus said in his philosophy about that same time that man must learn to go within and from within direct his divine nature or become its victim. So as I do quote the Bible, I'm quoting it strictly from the standpoint of science to let you have a look at what you're supposed to be doing while taking an earth trip in a body spacesuit run by a computer brain. So this researcher knew that while he was exchanging energy with the children, there was the possibility, since he read the book, they could be getting the information from his computer brain cells by thought exchange. There was another possibility, according to science, that they could be reaching out to the author's brain cells or to a book itself. Dr. Charles Tart wrote the book called Altered States of Consciousness. He also wrote the book called Psi, along with others, and he's been very involved in this realm of research dealing with the mind, reaching out from the physical and perceiving information. He found that he can put a book in another room, open it, and have a person go into alpha, while at this meditative state, send their mind from the physical to the other room and read that book verbatim. That this is the natural way for man to live. Now, what made him become aware of the naturalness of this was he noted that in our dreams at night, we read street signs, books, letters. When dreaming at night, you're in alpha. He also noted that people, when daydreaming, had what we call psychic experiences. They would pick up information as their mind wandered out and read information that would be of need to them. So he decided that we could be trained to go into the alpha state, where you are when daydreaming and when night dreaming, and project to another place and perceive information. So there was the possibility the children could be doing that, reaching to the author or to the book itself. So the researcher eliminated that possibility. He had them go into an alpha state, take a test on a book that he had not read. That means the information is not in his computer brain, and it is not in that room. They're going to have to project beyond the room to perceive that information. And found they still scored more than 80% accurate on the test. He knew then they were reaching beyond the room, so he moved his research on another step further. He took the children into alpha, took a local telephone book, at random flipped through that book, chose a name, address, and phone number, asked them to mentally project themselves to that address and tell him everything they were experiencing. What were they seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling? What were they experiencing there? And they came up with pages of information. He put in phone calls to the people, informed them of his research, and asked, would you be a part of my psychic program? Found them eager to be a part of it, and that the children were more than 80% accurate in what they had perceived. After a period of time of this research, he decided there were ways they could have received this information. There were many possibilities. The possibility that they belonged to the same social groups, to the same church, could at one time have been neighbors, could at one time attended the same schools. He must eliminate these possibilities to prove beyond all shadow of a doubt that we can reach out with our spirit senses and perceive information. So he took a telephone book of a town more than 2,000 miles away, at random flipped through that book, at random while they were in alpha, at random chose a name, an address, and phone number. He asked them to mentally project to that place 2,000 miles away and tell him everything they were experiencing, and they too came up with pages of information. When he put in long-distance phone calls to the people and inquired would they be a part of his research, when they gave him feedback, he found the children to be more than 80% accurate in what they had perceived 2,000 miles away. He knew then that he had the ability to train a person to go step by step into alpha, reach beyond the physical, and perceive information for whatever need that you might have. There was a medical institute that heard about this man's ability to train people to go into and out of altered states with conscious awareness at will. They didn't believe this was possible, so they called him up and inquired, would he come to their institute and let them do the connections with their equipment, because they didn't think he knew what he was doing. He said, I'll be very happy to. He took a young boy, went out to their institutes, they did the connections. Tony said, I'm going to go into alpha, and as he would go into alpha, the EEG machine and all the equipment would show that that's where he happened to be. He'd say, I'm going to come out of alpha, and it would show that it was reading between 14 and 32 cycles per second. He'd say, I'm going back into alpha, and it would again change, 7 to 14. I'm coming out of alpha, it'd read 14 to 32. Now, an EEG reading would look, depending on what you're looking for, this happens to be of one of my graduates in the Anaheim area. This is what sustained alpha frequencies look like after completing the class. This graduate had access to an EEG machine, wanted to see if they really could maintain an alpha state. Not only found they could, but found their amplitude was 10.0 amplitude. An EEG reading when doing a brain scan looks like this, and this happens to be made at the request of the school district on one of the children that is now a graduate of Mine Sci. At this time, the child was not a graduate. The mother brought me this chart after the school district requested that it be made and found that her daughter was normal. They asked her to have it made because they couldn't educate her daughter. They said, your daughter's educationally handicapped. We don't know whether there's brain damage from childbirth or whether she has a brain tumor, but there is some physical reason why we cannot educate her. We've hired tutors. We've done everything within our possibility and within our limits to educate her. No matter what they did, she still made D's and F's. The mother brought this chart to me and said, why can't my daughter be educated? Because the doctors have found her to be perfectly healthy and perfectly normal and nothing physically wrong. I explained to the mother that this is a computer and that the program must first be written in order for you to get the information off of the brain cells. That if her daughter took this class, she would find that her daughter, by restructuring a program correctly in this computer brain, that her daughter would be just as normal as any other child. She brought her that August, which has now been 6 years ago. She took the class and the following year made straight A's in the gifted children's 6th grade. This year she is a senior at the Antelope Valley High School in Lancaster, still making her straight A's. She went from a retiring child to a very outgoing individual to become a very successful person in school. One is not doomed to live their lifetime condemned to the mistakes that were made to our computer brains those first 7 years of our lives. So the whole time that Tony was telling the researchers that he was in alpha, the graph readout would verify that that's where he was. Well, they were oohing and awing about this because man is supposed to be uncontrollable over these aspects of his body and his mind. So as they were oohing and awing about it, the researchers said to them, we not only can go into altered states and maintain conscious awareness, but we can do something with it while there. He said, I'm sure that you have heard of Edgar Cayce, his health readings that he did, and he said, we can do something very similar to that and be more accurate than Edgar Cayce. Well, they didn't believe that either. But since they had just witnessed something they didn't believe, they agreed upon gathering together and giving this research a name of someone that they knew that had malfunctionings of the body. All he asked them for was the name, the age, the city, whether it was male or female. He said, I'll have Tony do you a health reading on this person. So they gathered together, agreed upon this name, and presented this to Tony while he was in the alpha state. Tony psychically reached out and brought this person on his screen. He told them how tall, color of hair, color of eyes, how much this person weighed, all things that had been wrong from the outer skin to the inner bone to the inner organ dimension, piece by piece. And the whole time that Tony gave them this health reading, he was right here in the middle of alpha and was 100% accurate. So they stood there oohing and awing. They wanted to know where they could be trained. The following week, they were all trained and went on to play a greater role in further research of what these different brainwave frequencies are for. Obviously, they're for some reason, or we'd just have one frequency. One of the things they were very interested in is what happens to you, the individual, when we, the psychic, go into the strong levels, no time, no space, and no limitations, and reach out and lock onto you and do these health readings. They were concerned about, could we harm you, or do we help you? And they made an amazing discovery. They found that you must be benefited for this reason, that we can only hurt and harm people here in the outer conscious level, because that's the only frequency where we can think up and send out from ourselves negativity. Any negative thought that you have not only creates the chemicals that's going to hurt you physically and give you dis-ease, but anybody within 60 feet of you, as you project this out, and they're within 60 feet, you can hurt them with your negative thoughts. Here at the outer conscious level, we may be constructive in our thought processes or destructive. However, when we get down to the strong brainwave frequencies, we can only create constructive thoughts and send them from ourselves. This is a fast frequency and the weakest of all the frequencies that we have. Wasn't that smart of the Creator to give us the power to be destructive at only the outer, weaker level? He knew that if we had that power within ourselves at the strong levels, that we not only would self-destruct, but we'd destroy mankind around us. So He didn't give us that free will at the strong frequencies. This is time and space objectivity. As we sit here in this room, we're not able to go through that wall. We're limited here in beta. This is no time and no space. This is physical. This is psychological. No time, no space, and no limitations. So when we get to the strong frequencies, we can only create and project from ourselves the positives. They connected people to the equipment, had them arrive here to the meditative state, and try to project hatred, fears, jealousies, any type of harm to anyone. And each time they would start creating negative thoughts, the person's brainwave frequencies would change. They'd pop out 14 to 32 cycles per second. They'd have them clean up their thoughts, go back to the strong levels, and try again to send out from themselves negativity. Immediately the frequencies would change, 14 to 32. They found that while we're here, we're unlimited in where we may send our spirit bodies to receive information. If that information is negative, you can be aware of it. If it's positive, you can be aware of it and use it for whatever need you have here. But you cannot send it out and hurt anyone from the strong levels. You can only become aware. I, for one, am very grateful the Creator put that stopgap right here and only let us have the power of negative creation here in the outer conscious level. This is the physical world, this is the mind world, and this is your own soul dimension. Time, space limitations? No time, no space limitations. We're trained to go into all the different kingdoms. We have mineral, plant, animal, human kingdoms. And while here, we can reach out and become aware of information to help any need that we have in any one of those different kingdoms. As we all sit together and start a class together, we start equal and we end equal. It really doesn't matter what kind of a doctorate or outer world education that you have. You don't need an education, nor is it a handicap if you don't have one, in order to be trained at your subjective dimension. This is your subjective education. Until one has the key to step into alpha and theta with awareness, and able to use these strong levels with awareness, then you'll forever be in bondage here to the outer world, limited here to the outer world, and never be able to use your whole potential. We have a computer brain, and this computer brain must be trained, a person must be trained to go here with conscious awareness in order to tap your potential. Until then, you're using 1.75% of your potential, just the outer conscious level. So whether you're a doctor or an attorney, a CPA, a student, a housewife, or a truck driver, you can be trained to reach out and use this for whatever need you use, whatever need you have to use it for. Everybody begins equal and everybody ends equal, and after you have ended, you may then use your potential for whatever need you have. You'll find your doctorates and your outer education of greater value to you once you have your inner world education completed. We're going to take a break. We'll come back from the break and we'll continue on and talk about the computer brain, the power, and how we tap our potential and use it for what our own individual needs might be. Thank you.
All right.
We have one of the greatest computers that's ever been built, and it's called a brain. It's portable, unique. Everywhere you go, it goes. It's the most powerful computer, far superior to anything that man can make. As man has imitated our Creator and built man-made computers, they don't begin to compare to what you have right here. Beginning from day of conception, the first part of you that was created was this brain, this computer, and they can pick up a brainwave frequency from day of conception. If you were to build a man-made computer large enough to house the information on just one brain cell, it would take a computer larger than a telephone booth. And if you were to build a man-made computer large enough to house all the information on all these brain cells, it would be larger than the Empire State Building and cost you billions and billions of dollars. Yet yours hasn't cost you anything. Why in the world don't we use it all? Man uses 1.75% of his brain. That's a person with a PhD. 1.75% of the brain. Now, it takes you years to get a PhD. After all those years, you would think you had the potential to use the whole computer brain. Why don't we? Well, I have a concept and a theory that isn't scientific. My concept is you didn't pay anything for it, and unless we pay something, money for something, it has no value to us. But scientifically, the reason that we don't use our whole computer brains is we haven't had the key to tap our potential. For us to have the key to use the power of this computer, we must have someone take us in step by step by step. Turn over the keys of conscious awareness at these different levels. And until someone does take you in and train you to go here step by step, you'll never tap your potential. Often I have people tell me, I'm a positive thinker. I really don't need this type of class. It doesn't matter how positive a thinker you are. We do have 7 years of childhood programming that we need to overcome. The very essence and nature of society that we grew up in, the society that has played a great role for 7 years of what they have planted in our computers, is negative by nature. Any organization or person or group who has taught you to fear anything has helped play a role in writing a path of self-destruction in this computer brain. Our paths of either health or disease, failure or success, poverty or wealth, was written in this computer brain those first 7 years from day of conception up to age of 7. Anybody who was in our energy field played a role of writing that program. Now, the rest of our lives is spent in a state of reaction to what was written those first 7 years. That, by the way, is why the Catholic Church says, give me a child until he's 7, and he'll forever be a Catholic. They know that our belief concepts are imprinted those first 7 years. 7 years of imprinting in this computer, writing the program. We have 7 more years from age of 7 to 14 to guide, to steer according to the program we wrote those first 7. You watch any Catholic, when some trauma comes along, they'll go into a state of reaction immediately. Now, that includes those who say, I'm no longer Catholic. They will forever be a Catholic because those first 7 years, the belief concepts taught to them was when they physically made this action, the reaction is that you'll be protected, that you're blessed. No hurt and harm can befall you. Now, as long as you believe it, the power of this computer will keep you blessed and protected. We have, now that happens to be a constructive belief concept, but we have a lot of concepts taught to us those first 7 years that are destructive in nature. In the advertising field, they've known for years to gear the ads for age 7 and under. They know that we're going to purchase their products according to a belief concept taught to us there, and the rest of our lives will be spent in a state of reaction. We're going to react by their product, by a belief concept. Just to give you one example, every September the news media starts with flu season is here. That if you don't feel well, take 2 aspirin, drink lots of water, go to bed, and you'll be okay. Now, the reason they tell us flu season is here is we have been taught that when we sneeze, we're catching a cold, that we can catch a cold from each other, that we can catch the flu or dis-ease from each other, when in fact scientifically you can't catch anything from anybody. The basic cause of all dis-ease is toxicity. Now, the toxins that we create by our thoughts would be the toxins that come from our negative thoughts. All negative thoughts create toxic conditions. We're all a host for every germ that exists. When you create the toxins, the germ has food to feed upon. It can divide and multiply and create conditions of dis-ease in our bodies. Now, toxins aren't just from thoughts. They also come from toxic food substance that we put in our body spacesuits. This is a spacesuit. The chemicals that become flesh are not just what we eat, but what we think. Let's look at one major toxic substance that we put in our bodies that causes dis-ease. Have you ever wondered where the word intoxication comes from? Why do they call alcohol, that when you drink alcohol, that you become intoxicated, that it is an intoxicant? What substance creates alcohol? Sugar. The most destructive thing that we put in our bodies is called sugar, sucrose in any form. It is toxic. It causes cellular breakdown. It causes dis-ease. Dr. Adkins wrote a book called Super Energy, in which he states that every cause of every disease is basically sugar. That goes from high cholesterol to heart conditions, to hardening of arteries, to on and on and on. We have a holistic doctor in California who's been involved in holistic medicine for many years. Shortly when he got out of medical school, he discovered that he was merely treating effects with people. This disturbed him. He felt that a doctor should be getting to the root and the cause of dis-ease. So he set up a place called Meadowlark in Hemet, where he treats the whole man, body, mind, and soul. And he's found that the basic cause of all dis-ease is toxicity, basically beginning with sugar and then negative thoughts. They have done research studies in penal institutes as well as mental institutes and found that the most vicious, angry, violent criminal can be made into a constructive, passive individual by removing sugar from their diet, that it causes one to be angry and violent. In a mental institute, they removed sugar from the diet and brought the insane back to what we call sanity, whatever sanity is. That sugar with our children has caused hyperkinetic children, dyslexia in our children. Simply by removing sugar from their diet, dyslexia corrects itself. Removing sugar from their diet, their grade point averages increase. A hyperkinetic child will settle down and become calm and constructive simply by removing sugar. Each one of us are a host for every germ that exists, but these germs cannot divide and multiply without food, and their food is toxicity. Consequently, you can't catch a cold. A cold is nothing more than your own toxins coming out of your body. Temperature is to burn up those toxins. The flu, the same as a cold, is just your toxins coming out of your body. So we can't catch the flu or the cold from each other. Well, then why do they tell us that the flu season is here and we're going to catch a cold? Because they have a product to sell, and they know that our childhood programming was if you go out in the rain, Get your head or your feet wet, you're going to catch a cold. Usually your death of cold, isn't it? Or death of pneumonia. If you sit in a draft, you're going to get a sore neck, a sore back, a sore muscle somewhere, when in fact the wind blowing across your body does not create a sore muscle or a sore body. You must have the toxins inside the body for you to have muscular discomfort, toxicity. So we not only are what we think, but we also are what we eat. We must watch those to keep the toxic conditions from happening. First 7 years the program is written. The next 7 years, development of the mind dimension. We are guided, steered according to those belief concepts. Now those belief concepts can be positive or negative, and basically our society is negative. From age of 14, one moves into the adult realm and starts developing the beta level, and from 14 to 32 is spent developing the outer conscious level. If you aren't 32, then you have not fully developed your beta level yet. And I'll be 32 again. I once was 32. I find it very significant that one of the great masters who walked this earth in a body spacesuit run by a computer brain was crucified at the age of 33. The master known as Jesus, who demonstrated the universal laws through him, and what appeared to be seeming miracles in his life were things that he told us that we should be doing too. There were many things he told us, and we're going to look at some of them this evening. But before we do, let's look at the macrobiotic philosophy and show you how they knew about these levels of consciousness also, and the importance of the development of this computer brain at proper ages. They knew that your whole lifestyle was going to be set for you from day of conception up to age of 4. Our scientists say by age 3.5 our education's over with. Well, not quite. It really takes the first 7. But the most indelible part is over with by age 3.5. In Zen Buddhism, the macrobiotic philosophy, from day of conception, they knew the brain is being developed and that it retraces all stages of its evolution. Our body cells go through an evolutionary cycle every 11 months. What is here tonight won't be here 11 months from now, except for brain cells. Even though these body cells reproduce themselves all the days of your life, every 11 months, not one cell will divide and multiply as many times as did the first cell that developed into a computer brain and the rest of these that grew as an extension. Now that development took place from day of conception in the 9 months of incubation. It went from the amoeba into a tadpole to a water mammal, and at moment of birth becomes a land mammal. As it retraced all those stages of evolution, that one cell divided billions and billions of times. And for the next 70 years, there's not one cell that will divide that many times again. So this was the most powerful time of your development. Consequently, a woman was put into pleasant surroundings. She was fed balanced yin-yang food. Yin stands for feminine, yang stands for masculine. In all societies and all languages, objects and people and things are either neuter, masculine, or feminine. So their food was masculine and feminine also. They knew that the food the woman was eating would be turned into building substance, to build a body spacesuit out of that substance as she carried it. But the most important thing was, where was she in her thoughts as she carried that child? What were the thoughts of those who were in her energy field as she carried that child? And a person was not allowed in her presence without spending 1 hour in the meditative state of alpha. They had to clean up their thoughts and leave all negativity outside. After spending an hour becoming positive and constructive, then they could come into her energy field. They knew that the thoughts of that person was going to be written into the computer brain of that child as it was being developed. The mother's responsibility as she was developing that spacesuit and that child was to spend a minimum of 4 hours a day in meditation, reading, thinking, meditating, and dwelling upon the profession she chose for that child. They truly gave them a head start. They structured that positive pattern in the computer brain so that they had a head start to be successful in their lives. My goodness, think of where we are. Think of where our parents were and what they were experiencing while they carried us. Look at the handicaps we've had to overcome. Look at the society that was in our presence those first 4 years of our lives and the negatives they helped write in our computers. Well, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you came from. What matters is where do you want to go to? Because when you have the key to step here and empty here, you can rewrite your computer program just like man can rewrite that computer's program. Rewrite this one and your life will become a state of reaction to what you put in your computer while functioning with awareness in theta. So the woman was putting these surroundings, music, food, pleasant surroundings. Nobody was let in that child's presence the first 4 years of his life without meditating for 1 hour. They knew the power of the development of the delta level. Now at age 4 until age 7, their children were taught the constructive use of the universal laws. 2 separate worlds of reality, spirit and matter. Matter is passive. Spirit is active. You ever see someone in a coma? The body spacesuit that there is totally inactive until the spirit that does not come from man, it comes from a higher power. Until that spirit enters into that spacesuit. As you see me here today, you see my spirit manifesting through the spacesuit. The spirit is abstract. But did it occur to you that we live in an abstract world? Thoughts are abstract, but they're still things. Have you ever seen a sound? How about an odor? Have you ever seen an odor? Have you ever seen a taste? And have you ever seen a feel? Well, you might see a feel demonstrated, but not a feel. These are all abstract. And we are perceiving this abstract world with this spacesuit equipment. There's only one objective sense, and that's what you see. So as we bring the others in, we perceive this abstract world by our imagination through our spacesuit. If we don't know about the divine laws of the spirit world that's brought together through this computer brain, if we're not aware of them, then when we break them, we're going to find the breaking of those laws manifested as dis-ease, as chaos about us. So Descartes says there are 2 separate worlds of reality, spirit and matter, and thanks to divine ordination they come together in one point only, the human brain. Let's look at Plotinus again. He said that man must learn to go within and direct his own divine nature or become its victim. Now if you feel that you have been a victim of life, it's because you haven't had the key to direct from within out. The only way that mankind can be in control of the abstract world is from first within himself, because this outer world is a continuous state of the spirit being manifested through him. So our programs are written those first 7 years, and in the macrobiotic philosophy from age of 4 to 7, they were taught the constructive use of the abstract laws, such as if you don't know about the law of gravity, which we do, but if you didn't, and you went up on this building and jumped off, what would happen to you? Kersplat everywhere. Ignorance of the law of gravity did not keep you from having the effects of chaos, discomfort manifested in your body by breaking that law. Now, if we have a lack of love, a lack of health, a lack of wealth, a lack of success, a lack in any area, it's because we have been breaking the abstract universal laws, and we see that manifested about us. I find it humorous because people walk around saying, ha, 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 you don't see my thoughts. Yes, we do. We not only see them written on the face, because your thoughts create chemicals that does become your flesh, but we see them daily manifested in the world about us according to our mental states. Your physical world is objective physical manifestation of first your mental state. Now you either thought it up or you let somebody else lay their trip on you. We take people's trips all the time, simply by sitting and being kind and listening to their negativity. Any thought you entertain, be it yours or someone else's, creates chemicals that becomes your flesh, and you're going to take a trip in time and space. We should be careful of the company we keep. I find this interesting because the great master named Jesus said, bring a child up in the way he should go, and he'll never depart from it, even unto his old age. See, he was teaching us about our lives being in a state of reaction. But what do? Do you realize we bring our children up with all the no-nos and the way they shouldn't go? He said, bring a child up in the way it should go. In Psychology Today, they printed an article about research they had done with a group of children. They wondered why those of us who are divorced individuals would go out and marry the same type of person. Now, you wouldn't marry the same body again. You wouldn't be that foolish. Some do. However, we marry the same type. They had a theory that the reason our lives are repetitive patterns of one negative cycle after another, and why we marry the same type, one after the other, had to do in direct relationship to what we were planning in this computer brain. So they brought these children into the room, told them, we are going to physically act out some negative scenes, and then we'll act out some positive scenes. When you recognize the negative, you stop us and tell us what it was. And when you recognize a positive scene, stop us and tell us what it's about. Every child in that room stopped them on the negatives, but not one child even recognized a positive. They felt this is what was happening, that since we were brought up with all the no-nos of what is not good for us, that we were living our lives in a state of reaction to that and going out and finding what we did not want. Now just think of how many times you have thought about, I sure don't want that to happen. And what happens? The very thing you didn't want. We find in that group of little books called the Bible that the story about Job was what he feared most, was what he had visited upon him. Earl Nightingale came along and said, you are what you think about all day long. Have you ever noticed that people who are full of fears have one trauma after another trauma happening to them? That their life is a repetitive cycle of the negatives happening to them? Simply because they feared it, they created it, and when the chemicals went to their body flesh, that was a command that you're going to live by every idle word you utter. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. It says, by thy words thou art condemned, and by thy words thou art saved. That there is power in the tongue. On and on and on. With the universal laws in those books that we break. How often have you said, oh, I'm not going to do that because I always get. You're right there in creating the conditions of what you don't want. I can think of once going dancing with my graduates, and they said, come and go dancing. And I said, no, I always get. The shortest, the fattest, and the drunkest. Here I am, 6 foot tall, and it was those this tall would ask me to dance. Well, they convinced me to go with them. We went 1 block away. We weren't even seated when the shortest, the fattest, and the drunkest, with his beer bottle still in his hand, walks up to me, looks up at me and said, would you like to dance? And I said, no, thank you. Turned to my friends and said, see, I told you. And they said, you sure did, Helen. You just demonstrated of how good you are at calling into you what you don't want. What do you want to dance with, Helen? You know, I hadn't considered that. I just knew what I didn't want. How often have we considered, what do I want in life? Or are we looking at what we don't want, and the don't wants were put in our heads those first 7 years? Science feels that's what's happening to us here, and why our lives is one repetitive cycle after the other of all the things we don't want and what we fear most. Age 7 in the macrobiotic philosophy, they part girls from boys. Girls are yin, boys are yang. For those opposites to attract, they need to be fully developed. They felt that if they left boys and girls together, that by thought transference, creating chemicals by those thoughts, that soon boys would look like girls and girls would look like boys, and they'd have a thing called unisex and high homosexuality. We have that in our society today. We even say, I wish they'd turn around so I could see if it's a boy or if it's a girl. They turn around, we still don't know the difference. Thoughts become flesh, and thoughts exchanged. Soon we don't have either male or female, but a combination of the two. So they parted them, and they knew that girls went on 7-year ages, 7-year cycles of development, that boys went on an 8-year cycle of development. So from 7 to 14, the girls were taught the arts of femininity, how to cook, the thoughts that she was to put in that food, because thoughts are things, do go in that object, and affects the health of all people who eat that food. It becomes your flesh also. At UCLA, they did a very interesting study on this also. They were concerned about how do our thoughts affect the health of people. And they found that people that have ulcers and intestinal tract disorders are eating food prepared by someone who is negative. They also found that by removing the cook from a family where they have continual colds and putting in another cook who was positive, that everybody got well. That the ones who were having colds, intestinal tract disorders, ulcers, were eating food prepared by someone who is negative. They did a chemical analysis of wine before the priest blessed it, and it had one chemical substance. After he blessed it, now blessings are positive thoughts, aren't they? After he blessed it, they did another chemical analysis and found it had a whole different substance. They did prove scientifically that thoughts are things and do go into objects, that you do eat your words. And the women in the macrobiotic philosophy were taught as she cooked, she was to bless that food. She was to put health in that food, and that her family would be healthy, that she was to prepare balanced yin-yang food. They also taught her that she controlled her sexual life with her husband from the kitchen. That if he was making too many passes, that's because she was feeding him too much masculine yang food, that she was to feed him passive feminine yin food, and he would become more passive. Now if he wasn't making enough passes, all right, let's feed him some yang food, and that will make him more masculine, and he'll come on stronger. The humor of this, she's then taught to obediently, meekly follow behind him and say nothing. Well, she didn't have to. She ran their whole life from the kitchen. Didn't need to say a word, and he never knew it. So from 7 to 14, she was taught all the arts of femininity, and the boys from 8 to 16 were taught the art of masculinity. A girl from 14 to 21 in that next 7-year cycle was matched astrologically, ethnically, morally, materially with her lifetime mate. A boy from 16 to 24 was matched with his lifetime mate. A girl from 21 to 28 reached her full maturity. Boys from 24 to 32 reached his full maturity. Our scientists haven't even discovered yet there's a difference between boys and girls. They just lumped us all together. Brainwave frequencies, all for a different reason and for a different purpose. So they developed their children according to the purpose of these for the first 14 years. After the age of 14, they were recognized as the adults they are. Now let's look at the universal laws that the man named Jesus Christ put into action. We would have understood this long ago. We would have understood that the Old Testament was the universal laws, The New Testament was how man was to put those laws in action. If man had not tampered with the Bible, and I'm sure you must be aware that man has tampered with it many times, when man chose not to change, he simply changed the written word throughout history. Well, that doesn't work. The universal laws remain the same. The very first 3 words of the Bible is a mistranslation. The very first 3 words, as it is now written, says, "in the beginning." But those 3 words come from the Hebrew word called, I'll write it down this way, B-O-R-A-Y-S-H-E, which means, "in the head was the beginning." Now let's look back to the 2 separate worlds of reality. The first part of the material world in your body spacesuit that's developed is your brain. In your head is your beginning. And each day of your life, as you have a thought, thoughts are abstract, in your head is where you loose those chemicals that go out and become your body flesh. In your head is the beginning of your flesh and of your spirit world being brought together in the computer brain. 2 separate worlds of reality, thanks to divine ordination, come together in one point only, the human brain. The universal laws, as demonstrated in the New Testament, in a body spacesuit, by a computer brain, by a master named Jesus Christ, he said for us to become as little children, to go within to our inner closet and to pray in secret, to pray believing we have received, and all things we need will be added unto us according to our faith, pressed down in full measure and overflowing. So let's look scientifically at those teachings. The only way anyone can become as a little child is brainwave frequency-wise, to lower your frequencies, and you do go within. There's no other way to go within. You don't become an adult till you start producing 14 above. So lower your frequencies and go within to your inner closet. That's a place within you in your imagination where you will control your outer world by putting control within first. Pray in secret as you go out and tell people what your needs are, what you have prayed for. They will put their needs and their limitations on you. It doesn't say you must live according to their needs. It says all things you need, and our needs daily change. As you tell your relatives, your parents, or your friends what you have asked for, they look at you and say, "You don't need that. You don't need a new car. You don't need a larger house. What do you want that for? Oh, you don't want to do that." Of course you do if you want to do it. That's your free will, not theirs. It is your trip to take here, not theirs. That's why it says, pray in secret, and all things you need. As I stated, our needs go in movement. Life is in movement. Nothing is still. Life is motion, and when you say, "I'm not going to move left or right, I'm not going to make any mistake," then you're already dead. Because life is in rhythm, in harmony, in balance, and you must learn to move in rhythm, in harmony, and in balance. And for you to move with rhythm, harmony, and balance, you must go within to have this manifested here in your outer world. All things you need will be added unto you according to your faith. Have you noticed how it's you and your, not someone else? There are as many different interpretations of faith as there are fundamental religions, and I'm sure you must be aware there's hundreds and thousands of different religions out here. And this, by the way, is not a new religion. It is simply looking at the laws of how they pertain to you, the individual. And I will also add, I'm not anyone's guru. I'm simply me, a person taking a trip here that has brought together these tools to give you the key so you make the trip according to your choice, not someone else's. I never ask a person to follow me or to accept what I say as that's it. And when anybody does, they're putting you in bondage to them. Be careful of the bondage that organizations and people put you in. It was not meant for you to live in bondage to me or me to live in bondage to you. It was meant for every person whose spirit is taking a trip here to demonstrate the universal laws according to your understanding, as constructively as you knew how, to bring order in your life, not to create disorder in you or outside of you. So faith in Hebrews says, faith is a substance of things hoped for. When we hope for something, we make a mental image of it. Science has proven those thoughts are things, that they actually go into that wine. So it's a substance of things hoped for. And that's why Job said, the thing I feared was the thing that got him. The thing I feared most has been visited upon me. Faith is the substance of things hoped for. It is evidence here of those things unseen. We do not see those thoughts flying through the room, but our lives are daily evidence of where we have been in our thoughts, and either it's the thoughts we thought up or it's the thoughts that we let someone else lay in our computer. Either way, you created the chemicals by what you entertained in this head of yours. Make sure that what you entertain here is what you want and not what someone else's want. All things you need will be added unto you according to your faith, pressed down in full measure and overflowing. So it's telling us that we may have abundance in our lives. As someone stated here earlier, that spiritually they were wealthy. Yes, we all are. We all have wealth. It's here just waiting to be manifested through us. But you must learn how to go within and direct it through you. We have body space suits in which our spirit is taking a trip. And this spacesuit is run by a computer brain. And each time you entertain a thought, be it positive or negative, it creates the chemicals, and you're going to take a trip here in time and space according to what you entertained in your computer. Make sure the trip you're taking is what you want. You will not have control of this outer world or the ability to escape your genetic code bondage that you are in until you have the key to step within and unify the three parts of you to work as one. There are three spirits to man, and science calls it conscious, subconscious, and superconscious. The Polynesians call it low self, middle self, and high self. So did the American Indian, so did the Eskimos. Jesus called it the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. That's the Trinity of man, the three that is to work together as one. And the Greek word for holy means health. And the word holy means a whole I, the three working as one. It is here that those three are unified as one, and it's also here in Alpha that you become healthy. What you need is 1 hour with conscious awareness in Alpha, and it does not have to be one straight hour. It can be 4 times a day, 15 minutes at a time, or 3 times a day, 20 minutes at a time, so long as you have a minimum of 1 hour with conscious awareness at Alpha, and you do become healthy. Holy and healthy. From here, as you direct your divine nature and the spirit world, as you objectify it from within, we find it then manifested here in the outer physical world according to our faith, the pictures that we made, pressed down in full measure and overflowing. The first night of our class, we learned how to lower our frequencies to raise our consciousness, to go within, to put order within, so we can have order without. We learn what to do with it once we arrive here. There's many organizations that can teach you to go into meditation, but they don't teach you what to do with it. That's like handing you the keys to a Rolls Royce. That's no good. It sounds pretty. Where does it take you? If you don't know how to sit behind that wheel, turn it on, and direct it where you wish to go, just sitting there is not good enough for you. You're going to feel good, but so does a Rolls Royce feel good. Sounds good too, doesn't it? So you're going to feel good just by being turned on, but that doesn't take you anywhere. For you to go anywhere, to arrive at any destination, you must sit behind the wheel of control and learn to be a decision maker. Make your decision of where you want to go, and then act upon that decision. Think and grow rich, not on your life. But you can think and act and grow rich. There must be actions in order for you to have reaction. Thinking alone will not do it. That's why it says faith without works is dead. Faith being pictures of things you hope for. You must work that. You must put some actions behind those thoughts in order for you to have reaction. We live in a world of cause and effect, action, reaction. Every effect you're living, there is a cause. Every reaction you're living, there is first an action. You cannot have an action without reaction, or reaction without there being an action first. That's the universal law. There's nobody who can escape that. So from within, we can control this outer world of our bodies by controlling the thoughts we have made at the strong level and then physically acting on them here. We learn to go within and how to apply it in our health, our education, for our success, to be situation solvers for ourselves and for our fellow men. We learn about the Trinity of man, and by looking at it from the Polynesian standpoint, we learn what the mind part of us is, so we can bring it in our control with conscious awareness. And until it's in your control, you'll never have control here. When you do bring it in your control, you're going to find your outer world even greater, even more enhanced than controlled electricity gives you. We learn how to help our children by helping them from the no time, no space level of stopping bedwetting, nail biting, thumb sucking, this type of thing. We need to be in control of ourselves, and we have certain techniques for learning how to control our physical bodies from within. We're programmed by the Creator to go through 90-minute sleeping cycles. And the first 90-minute sleeping cycle gives us 5 to 7 minutes of alpha time while dreaming at night. The second one gives us approximately 22 minutes of alpha time, and the third one gives us 30 minutes of alpha time, and the fourth one gives us 45 minutes of alpha time. Doctors Luce and Siegel in their research found that 5 to 7 minutes in the beginning of your sleeping night, the dreams you have are about your childhood. You're being shown the hang-ups and fears taught to you then, and to release them, to let them go, that they are of no value to you. The next 2 dream cycles are how you're interacting, relating with your fellow man in your day-to-day life. Am I constructive or am I destructive? That last 45 minutes every morning is a sneak preview of where you have been in your thoughts. And those thoughts are shown to you before they become physical, objective realities. And that you have the power to change them before they become physical realities, and that's why you're having a sneak preview. Have you ever experienced deja vu? That's where you walk into a room and have a conversation and say, I've had this before. Or you walk into a place and you say, I've been here before, even though you have not been there before. That's because you experienced it here, and as you experienced it here in the physical world, you said, I've already lived this. Yes, we did. Everything, even to where you are right now, has already happened to you. You may not be consciously aware of having experienced it, but you experienced it in your dreams before awakening in the morning. If there's any dream that you have that you do not want to meet face to face in time and space, you do have the power to go back within. Since you thought it up, you can think it down. The Greek word for repent means change your mind. So you can change your mind. When Doctors Luce and Siegel had the college students go back into alpha, change it, and wrote down what they changed it to, they experienced deja vu here of what they changed it to. If they didn't change it, they would always experience the negative event that they saw originally. So we do have the power to change our destiny by simply using our imaginations at the strong levels. Change your mind. We need to be in control of time and space, but we must do that from within. There are many people who have prayed for things and never got them. 20 years later, it finally was given to them, but that wasn't meeting their needs. They didn't need it 20 years later. They needed it 20 years before. If there are things you need today, you can have them today, but you won't be able to have them in the here and now if you don't have the key to go here to direct when, where, and how you want it to be here. So we do learn to be in control of time and space from the no time, no space level. We learn to be in control of another abstract thing called headache. Ache and pain is part of the abstract world that's manifesting in our bodies. A headache manifests in different places, doesn't it? So by giving it objectivity within, we're controlling the abstract world as it's being manifested in our objective bodies. This is for migraine and tension type headaches. Control from within, in control here in the bodies. We then start learning to use our imaginations for ourselves. We're taught the first 7 years how to use it for what we don't want. Now we need to learn to look for what we do want, to be a decision maker and act upon our decisions. We create for ourselves a psi screen, that when we go to our psi mind level in alpha, that we can start directing our imaginations constructively, in control, by when we need it. We learn brutal first memory pegs to enhance our creative imagination and to develop our clairvoyant ability. This improves your recall of information and gives you a greater memory. We learn how to turn negative conditions into positive conditions here, so that we then experience the positive conditions in the outer world. We learn to arrive at the theta level with conscious awareness and to rewrite into our computer brains a program of what we do want and give physical reaction to it here without having to think about it. Rewrite the program. It doesn't matter what you came from. It doesn't matter how many hang-ups and limitations that were put in your computers as a child. You may be what you want to be, do what you want to do, have what you want to have by the magnificent power of your computer brain. But you must do it for yourself. There's no one who can do it for you. Only you can arrive here with conscious awareness and put in this computer what you want, and you'll give physical reaction to it here, normally, naturally, without having to think about it. One can overcome any handicap given to us as children. We learn to be in control of hemorrhaging and bleeding. There's no reason why one should have to suffer all night with a toothache, but ache and pain is showing us there is dis-ease in our bodies. We don't just take it away and ignore it. The first thing we do is consult our medical advisor, who has the knowledge to put us back in a healthy condition. But you do heal yourself. We don't need to suffer all night. We can take the pain away or stop the bleeding until we do get to the medical doctor. We learn to change habits for stopping of smoking or controlling of eating to lose or to gain weight. You haven't smoked too long. For those of you who would like to cut down your smoking habit or stop your smoking habit, when you make your pattern changes and control your habit at the strong levels, it is easy for you to follow through with that change here in the outer conscious level. We give you a lecture on reincarnation, and it's the only portion of the class that is not scientifically based. There are many possibilities. I personally believe in reincarnation. Otherwise, there would be no reason why we should have to obey the universal laws and do unto others constructively as we want them to do unto us. Otherwise, go out and do your thing to whoever, wherever. But I personally believe in the universal law that you will reap what you sow, that we do have an effect for everything we cause. and that we are the cause of it. For that reason, our spirit is going to reincarnate. It's going to be made flesh again. But there are many things of what reincarnation could mean. If you look backwards in your life and think about the negative past, you are putting the chemicals loose in your body that will become your flesh again. So every time you look backwards instead of forward, you are reincarnating, you're making flesh again. Careful what you're making flesh, because the universal law, according to the teachings of the great master, is forget those things which are behind. You can't change the past. The only thing you can change is this moment forward by what you put in your computer. Forget those things which are behind, but press on toward the mark. Very clearly says we must have something to work toward. Forget those things which are behind, press on toward the mark. So the word reincarnation could mean many different things, and we take a good look at it. We then move on to develop our spirit senses, to reach beyond the physical. We have a physical world, we also have a spiritual world. We have a physical body and we have a spiritual body. You have physical eyes and you have correlating spiritual eyes. Physical ears and spirit ears, nose, mouth, hands, and brains. Any physical equipment you have spiritual equipment. There is a spirit body that's manifesting through the physical. Dr. Charles Tart at Davis University said, the only difference between one who is dead and you and I is they no longer have an earth substance body spacesuit, and without it they cannot make themselves expressed, they cannot be heard, they cannot speak. The spirit, in order to manifest, must have a house all its own. It must have this to manifest through. Does say in that book that from dust it came, to dust it shall return, but that the spirit of man is eternal. And the scientists are finding that the spirit of man is taking a trip here in the spacesuit according to the computer brain. In your head is your beginning. The beginning was the Word. And what is the Word? What you think and what you speak. When we were children, our physical senses were developed by our imagination, by the direct guidance of some adult. An adult put an object in your hands and said, feel of it. Look at it. Listen to it. It takes 3 of your senses to build one frame of reference, but it only takes 1 sense to recognize it. If this watch were not running and I felt of it, I would know that that was a watch. If it were behind me and I heard it but did not see it or feel it, I would know it was a watch. Or if it were at the back of the room and I saw it but did not hear it, I would know it was a watch. But it took all 3 senses to build that frame of reference. Ever watch children learn to eat? In learning to eat, they put it in their ears, on their face, they smell of it, they play with it, they try to even rub it into the computer brain. They are building frames of reference. Our spirit senses should have been trained these first 7 years, as were the physical, by the same imagination, but they weren't. It isn't too late, however. As we go here to this level of consciousness and use our imagination, we can train our spirit senses to go into all the kingdoms, mineral, plant, animal, and human kingdoms, and fulfill a promise that was given to us in Genesis, when it said that man was to have dominion over all the kingdoms, and those kingdoms belong to the outer conscious physical world. Mineral, plant, animal, and human kingdoms. Now, if we don't have dominion over those kingdoms, that means we don't have control or dominion over ourselves. So we train our spirit senses to have conscious awareness in these different kingdoms. We start with the minerals lead, copper, brass, and stainless steel. Those are the 4 that we find most predominant in the needs that we have of daily living, of plumbing, electronics, engines, the human anatomy. We actually have stainless steel in the human anatomy. For us to have dominion over those, we have to train our spirit senses in those to see, hear, smell, taste, feel, so that when we go into the meditative state, with just one sense, we can recognize it. So we build frames of reference in the human and in the mineral kingdoms, and then the plant, and then the animals, and then we create that inner closet and put in it a clock, a calendar, so we can have control of time and space, and all other things that we need to be accurate psychics. We then build, after we have built our inner closet, we have raised our consciousness enough to converse with our own superconscious. The Polynesians call it the high self. Jesus called it the Holy Spirit. It has always been with us, guiding us and leading us on our earth trip, but we must have conscious contact with it in order to be led and guided divinely as we take our earth trip. George Washington, one of our greatest presidents, was divinely led by his female counselor. So we've raised our consciousness, we meet and converse and experience being with our superconscious, who then will guide us as we take our trip here and express the universal laws through us according to our own individual understanding. After we've made contact with them, we build frames of reference in the human anatomy, learning to detect malfunctionings to help others help themselves. Not to be nosy, but there are many people who have a need, and we can help you help yourself, and we have seeming miracles that take place. One young lady in San Diego, a jockey thrown from the horse, aorta severed from the heart, spleen ruptured, liver ruptured, and by our help, we helped her help herself, and in 30 days, totally well. Doctor says one cannot live. Everybody can reach out, perceive information, detect abnormalities, and help others help themselves and be at least 80% accurate in what they perceive after 1 week of training.